Good evening, Father Martin. How are you?
Doing well. So I guess on Twitter, there's some sort of glitch where it's not immediately posting to our walls or our feeds the show to live stream, which is kind of lame because the only people that get the notification otherwise are just people that are following us instead of anybody who could retweet it. That those sorts
Yeah.
of things. But I figured out you have to actually share it. You have to click it. You have to go to the
Okay.
video, you click it and share it. Uh,
Okay, let's see.
that's what I'm
Trying
doing
to,
right
trying
now.
to do it right now. That's what I was trying to do before this happened. Let's see. Share broadcast. Okay, there we go. Okay, posted.
And post,
Maybe that's a new change that they made.
but you still
Let's
have to
see.
click the link. Oh, there
Yeah.
it is.
Okay, I was,
Okay,
able, I was able to share it. Let's see. Now
there
let
you
me
go.
go over to yours. We're grifting. Share broadcast. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Done. Now I shared yours. Let's see how that looks.
That's annoying.
Let's see. Let's see. I'm sorry for being so late again. This is all my fault. I don't know if you told everybody in the
No,
in
I
the
haven't told
chat.
anybody.
Oh, it says Alberto has reposted this stream. It looks like
There
maybe
you
shows
go.
up in the comments. Yes, Snell. So had a ladies, for all the ladies watching, if you're a stay-at-home mom, you should really appreciate what your husband does to keep things that way. Saying that for personal experience. But no, having had a pretty decent day, all things included. Father, how about you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Started early, 7 a.m. mass. And then had a couple
That's right.
appointments. Had some work I had to get done for the gala, things like that. In my office and
Getting
my prayers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We are having people logging in. Usually that's the first few minutes of the stream. So people are logging in. Welcome everybody as we start to log in so we can start our show. The topic of today's stream, as every Friday, is just whatever you all want us to talk about. Mark Becker, thank you so much for joining us in the chat. I see you. I see your question. So that'll be the first question that we get to. We made sure. 'Cause I know that what was it last week, Father? I logged in, and several of us were not able to see every single question that was out there. But now, before going live, we made sure. Okay, Father Martin, are you seeing all of the questions? Are you seeing Mark's questions? Yes, I'm seeing it. Are you seeing it? Yes. Okay. Nothing else. Okay, let's go live. So we're getting ready to answer your question, Mark. As more of us start logging in, we just doubled the amount of people logged in. So people logging in, Father, I'm seeing a new note from LifeSite News. I was very much out of the Twitter world today. I wasn't terribly busy. I was just doing other things. So let's see. LifeSite or Sign of the Cross, whatever the name of the new Sign of the Cross, the new media postulate from the LifeSite News crowd. And it says that the Vatican launches a new attack on Marian devotion. Let's see. Trying to look for it again because I just had it open and then I went to share our stream and I lost it. Did you hear about that, Father?
I did not. And
Let's see. New Marian attack, something like that. Let's see. I'm looking it up. The Vatican just launched another attack on the Blessed Virgin Mary. The title of this LifeSite News article says Pope Leo approves Pontifical Marian Academy statutes rejecting maximalism in devotion to Our Lady. The statutes also say that the spread of Marian knowledge should serve not only the Church, but a universal brotherhood in solidarity, justice, and world peace. So let's see. LifeSite News, Vatican City. Pope Leo XIV has approved new statutes of the Pontifical International Marian Academy that express the goal of avoiding maximalism in Marian devotions. On Saturday, the Vatican published new statutes regarding the identity and purpose and governing composition and structure of the Pontifical Marian Academy. A few clauses of the statutes could potentially be used as a pretext for rejecting certain Marian devotions, prompting at least one commentator to describe them as an attempt to subtly alter and weaken Marian devotion. For example, while expressing the Academy's mission of promoting, supporting, and coordinating Marian research, Article 4 of the statutes declares that this should be conducted in view of a healthy popular piety to avoid any form of maximalism or minimalism. Whatever that means, I'm not entirely sure what that means. LifeSite continues, the statutes also proclaim that Marian piety should not be reduced to a sterile devotionism, but give life to Marian places that promote the well-being and integral development of the human person in harmony with the environment. So, if you are using plastic straws, you don't have a true devotion to Our Lady. This it says, no, while no faithful Catholic would defend superstition or doctrinal excess detached from the Church's teaching authority, the terminology employed seems to subtly redefine what generations of saints, theologians, and popes promoted without hesitation, remarked Radical Fidelity Substack. I'm not terribly familiar with the Radical Fidelity Substack, but definitely, at least in this comment, Father, it seems to be understanding what the Vatican is trying to do, which Pope Francis famously said, Father, oh, if anyone attacks my mother, I will punch him in the face. And now it seems that that rhetoric is being talked back so that we can incorporate Marian devotion or whatever the Novus Ordo Church thinks or is trying to implement as Marian devotion into the universal brotherhood.
Procedamus.com. And this is, it definitely dovetails into what the SSPX is, continually doing today. SSPX recently also today released another article basically saying, why are we going to be penalized for doing what the Chinese bishops themselves are doing, that the Vatican is turning a blind eye to? The Vatican bishops, or not, the communist Chinese bishops, are choosing communists to consecrate to lead their church for ideological purposes, whereas the SSPX are consecrating bishops simply to keep the faith. It really puts things into perspective that the agenda, the Francis Pontificate, this is Francis 2.0, the destruction of the church, the destruction of piety continues on, and people like Cardinal Burke are silent. They'll tell you're systematic if you don't participate in this destruction of devotion to Our Lady. We live in a bizarre world, and so the vitriol really was vitriol that a lot of professional Catholics had towards the SSPX when they announced the consecrations, and that they might still go forward with it after the meeting with Tuchos Mucho Fernandez in the Vatican. That there's still people that they don't get it. They don't get it. This is to keep the faith. This is to keep the faith and to keep the sacraments, because you can't pretend that you're a shark in a goldfish bowl. That's what all these professional Catholics are thinking. They're little goldfish swimming around in a little aquarium in someone's living room, thinking they're sharks. Oh yeah, I'm a real traditional Catholic, even though I go to some sort of illicit mass, listen Novus Ordo. I'm conservative. No, you're a dinky little goldfish.
And I was having a conversation about this sort of topic, Father, about whether people get it or don't get it. And I was telling my friend, I said, and so this one friend is very, very heavily supportive. He's supportive of Restless Heart Media. He's very supportive of the SSPX, of traditional Catholicism in general. And we're talking about, our discussions and argumentations with people that are against tradition. And I told him, or people that are either against tradition or a little hesitant, sort of, oh, hey, they'll come to us in real life and ask us, hey, I heard about the SSPX. Like, what do you guys think? Or, is that problematic or this or that? Of course, I think the topic of the consecrations is not problematic at all in terms of the reality is that the SSPX has a lot of priests, a lot of benefactors that have given them money, that have bought chapels for them to have their mission parishes at, their mission churches at, that expect them, Father, to continue traditional Catholicism. So in a sense, it would be a disservice to all of their benefactors, people that have spent millions, and you just take a look at the Immaculata Church, to not consecrate new bishops that can continue what the SSPX sees as their mission in traditional Catholicism. Whatever you think about the SSPX, maybe you're a sedevacantist and don't like whatever that is. But when it comes to the benefactors and what the benefactors have given them money for to build up all of these things, it's usually with an expectation, Father, of preserving traditional Catholicism, whatever their view of it is. Mm-hmm. And it would be a grave disservice for the SSPX not to consecrate bishops to ensure that their mission can continue. Period. End of story. Whether you support the SSPX or not, whatever we may think of them, benefactors have given their money with the understanding that they are fighting to preserve traditional Catholicism. Catholicism does not work without bishops. you need bishops now, and you need ordinary jurisdiction, Father, which is
Mhm.
another topic. Just playing here within the field of the SSPX. The SSPX has been trusted by hundreds of thousands of benefactors for the preservation of traditional Catholicism. So they have to do this. It's really not an option. So, but anyway, the conversation with my friend was about, well, I've read the books by Archbishop Lefebvre. Of course, I know the reality of the Novus Ordo service because it's not a mass.
Mhm.
But we deal, Father, usually, maybe you do as well, with a lot of people that have not taken the time and maybe don't even know what they're Catholic, but they don't really know where to go to learn more about the crisis in the church. Do you agree with this? In terms of a lot of Catholics out there that don't even know where to start to learn about the crisis in the church.
Yeah, to learn about tradition and learn about the crisis of the church are kind of two different starting points in a sense that, I mean, it really is just ask a traditional priest, ask someone who's traditional, because Archbishop Lefebvre wrote many books. I mean, An Open Letter to Confused Catholics is a relatively short book that kind of gets your feet wet in understanding the crisis. Of course, there's other books like from Roberto de Mattei, the Second Vatican Council, an unwritten story that really goes into the details of the council and all the machinations that were going on behind the scenes, naming names and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, you get a little bit more profound knowledge of what actually happened around the Second Vatican Council. But I mean, really, any book by Archbishop Lefebvre is sufficient. Of course, Michael Davies wrote volumes and volumes of books regarding this subject. There's podcasts of him, giving talks. And then, of course, the SSPX has their podcast series. But yeah, for the most part, An Open Letter to Confused Catholics is really the book that it's just very blunt in demonstrating that there is a crisis.
And I know people living in real life that say, "Hey, look, I'll take the time to walk you through Open Letter to Confused Catholics." If you are somebody that has honest questions, let's take the time and I'll help you learn about the grace in the church. If you're honest,
Mhm.
because a lot of people have different attachments, and we just really know, again, because grace builds on nature. If you have for example, I know people that in real life that disagree, Father, that husbands have complete authority over their wives. That's really, yes, it's a teaching of the faith, but it's also natural. Men are stronger than women. Period. End of story. So when we find people with different attachments that are really not interested in having an honest discussion, which they'll say, Father, oh, why did Father Martin block me? Well, because you are not interested in having an honest discussion.
And I actually did go through and literally unblocked absolutely everybody. Well, except for one person. Except for one person. Um, but yeah, so which is kind of funny because a lot of people have just quit engaging, so to speak. I mean, there's some people that come onto my feed and call me a schismatic or old Catholic, just spreading lies and all this kind of stuff. And so I just let them be now, because I just post a picture like I posted earlier today of the transgender hermit from the Diocese of Lexington. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm schismatic from this. You're either, this is why there's a crisis. You're either a heretic because you profess to be in communion with heretics, which is the synodal church, or you're schismatic from, you're broken away from it, and you actually have the Catholic faith. But there's this rupture between the hierarchy, the continuity of hierarchy, versus actually keeping the faith. That's why it's a crisis. That's why it's a crisis. If there was one position where you didn't have to be neither schismatic or a heretic, there would be no crisis. That's the one that everybody should choose. But that's the reality. Now, Sedevacantists, of course, will say, "Oh no, we're neither schismatic nor heretics." Well, the reality is, even if they get a true pope, well, first of all, you can't even get all Sedevacantists to agree on whether the pope is either formally or just materially not the pope, sort of thing. The thesis versus the totalists, these sorts of things. So to get them all to agree that one person is pope, that's gonna be tough. But even then, if that pope says one thing bad in one encyclical or whatever else, boom, everyone's Sedevacantists again. So it doesn't really actually uh, solve the problem. We could just be right back where we are in the very next papacy after the true pope finally comes back. So it's bizarre. Something in our understanding of the papacy needs to be fixed so that this doesn't happen again. Something, or things listed out in canon law to give us instruction on what to do if there is a heretic pope. Because right now all we have are opinions of doctors of the church, but they're not morally binding. So
And we will eventually get to that point, Father, but there are different the church really outlines how to deal with a specific issue, with a specific crisis, usually once it already happens. That's just how it works. So I completely agree with you. And I, of course, want to thank everybody for joining us tonight on our Friday night leisure live stream. Father Martin and I just here ready to answer all your questions. We see the questions in the chat. We are just working through, Father, here's the thing. Restless Heart Media and the purpose of existing of Restless Heart Media is to go anti-grifters, anti-news, and providing content that is evergreen. So Friday night we get to offload a little bit of what we have in our minds because we do our series on. You post our sermons, your sermons live here, not live, your sermons here on the channel. We do our Tuesday series on the story of a soul by Saint Therese, and we are already working on what the next book will be. Of course, suggestions accepted. It's not a democracy, but you can suggest. My Saint Therese book a little bit over there. So Friday night is kind of our time to unwind a little bit, relax, have a drink, and then just talk through a lot of these things that are in our minds and also in the minds of everybody here in the Restless Heart community page. So thank you for your questions. We are just working through the questions. Chris Lopez, welcome to the chat. Diane, nice to see you. Yeah, I know we see your question. We see your question, Gavin. Very nice to have you.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening to everybody. So we are seeing your questions. We are just talking through a few, and we will get to answering those questions here in a few minutes. We will be catching up. So yes. So we have to be a little patient, Father. Whenever that we can either go to our SSPX parish, and then that's really about it, because at least most of the people that are at the SSPX parishes have already done their due diligence in understanding the crisis in the church. But for those of us who don't, for example, if you are at an FSSP parish, I feel bad for you, really. That's another topic. The FSSP put out a scathing statement against the SSPX in the regarding the topic of the consecration of their bishops. And one of the things that they see, Father, as an error is that the SSPX teaches that the Novus Ordo Mass does not fulfill the Sunday obligation. People don't really, the FSSP was very offended at that, which every year, however, when it comes to the Christian Mass, Father, they have a problem with attending the concelebration with the bishop. So where is the honesty there, Father? Do you think there's a discrepancy there in opposing the Novus Ordo Mass? Sorry, not opposing, of refusing to offer the Novus Ordo Mass, of refusing to concelebrate with the bishop on Holy Tuesday, Thursday?
Thursday. But actually, now in many dioceses they do it on Tuesday. They don't even do it on Thursday.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying, on Tuesday, but still using the oils. Do you think there's a discrepancy there, or some hypocrisy?
I don't think there's a hypocrisy in them using the oils per se, because I think their major objection is merely the concelebration. So I know FSSP priests will actually go and attend and sit in choir at the Chrism Mass, but they won't actually concelebrate, because of course that takes away from their own celebration of the Mass that day, because you're only supposed to offer it one time. But then again, can you take a stipend? Do you offer an intention? Who has the intention when you have 200 priests sitting there concelebrating the same Mass? Not only that, but then, like, for instance, one diocesan priest who was traditional brought up the scenario where he was, standing up for the Eucharistic prayer, canon, whatever, and one of the priests, the elderly priest, got sick, was kind of fainting, whatever else, and so he took him back to the sacristy, helped him out a little bit, but then came back, and the consecration already happened, all that kind of stuff. Did he offer Mass? Did he not? What happened? What happens in those scenarios? So, there's all these situations where it would just make sense to not make it obligatory. Nevertheless, even in the Eastern rites, they have concelebration, but it's simply a spectacle, in the sense that it's there to show unity amongst, like, the bishop is the high priest in the diocese. He is the high priest, and the priests are basically his helpers, his co-workers. And so it's meant to show this hierarchy in the clergy, more so than it is to make something ideological out of it, which is what the Novus Ordo was doing. So I don't think there's so much that, but there is something to be said about not offering a what they would say is a legitimate rite of the Roman Church. If you're a Roman priest, you offer the Roman rite. If there's two rites or forms of the rite, you offer them both. So I think there is that the real hypocrisy is other people can go to this to fulfill their obligation, but they themselves won't offer that mass. I think that's where the ultimate hypocrisy lies. So yeah,
That's that's a very good point. So they themselves won't offer the mass that they tell their faithful that they must attend, and then had several people, Father, getting snarky at me over in a comment that I made because I don't. This is so cringe. I don't even want to say it. So apparently, the institute sent one of their priests. They would say canons. Okay, if they self-identify as canons, even though they're not canons, then we need to be respectful of that. So the Institute of Christ the King, Sovereign Priest, sent one of their canons in this bogus ordo cruise. Over 2,000 people at this Catholic cruise, and then they posted a picture of their canon with Father Mike Schmitz, or whatever, however you pronounce his name, Father Mike, as commonly known, colloquially known, Father Mike. So they posted a picture of their canon with Father Mike, and then the Institute posts, "Hey, we challenged him to offer the Latin Mass. He's not allowed to, as per Traditiones Custodes." That's one of the dumbest tweets that I can ever imagine. He is not allowed to, as per Traditiones Custodes. I don't even know what to say about that tweet. He's not allowed to. And so then I posted, well, as per Traditiones Custodes, he's not allowed. And then people, this is the level of delusion that people have. Well, yes, all he has to do is ask his bishop for permission. As I said, he is not allowed to.
The bishops aren't going to give this blanket permission. They don't want to promote the traditional Latin Mass. Not only that, but he's also risking his career. I mean, he's a lifestyle or live teen guy, Ascension Press. He's not going to risk, the good that he has going for him simply for learning something new that he's never going to be able to use.
So, but really, mainly this idea of, all he has to do is ask his bishop, because, okay, then you're proving the point that he's not allowed to. But a lot of people, Father, have this mentality, this belief that if only they show their bishop how good of a Catholic they are, how conservative of a Catholic they are, how they pray to all the martyrs and how they pray the rosary every day and this and that the bishop will be like, oh, okay, cool. The Latin Mass is making you a really, really good Catholic. And okay, so then this has good fruits, and so on and so forth. So we want to live in this triumphalistic delusion that if you just show your bishop how good of a Catholic you are, or you think you are, because it's all about externals anyway, really. If you show your bishop how good of a Catholic you are, he will now all of a sudden think that the Latin Mass is just wonderful. That sort of is the world that all of these people believe in. Now, for people that believe, Father, that, for example, you have to go ask Archbishop Hicks, the new Archbishop of New York, whether you can practice your religion or not. See, for people who believe that, I just don't even know what to say. We're not living in the same universe. If you believe that you have to go ask the bishop that is singing, what was he singing? Alicia Keys or something like that from the pulpit.
Oh yeah, New York, concrete jungle where things are made.
Or Bad Bunny. He was even quoting one of the Bad Bunny songs.
Oh my goodness.
So I wonder what they think in the chat. So chat, do you think that if Archbishop Hicks does not give you the permission to be Catholic, that we are morally bound to that? I'm not talking canonically. I'm not talking about any of that. But at the end of the day, Father, that's what so many people hate about you, and really about Bishop Mikkel and the old Roman Catholic See of Caer-Glow, is that you don't have to ask anyone for permission to simply exist, to simply practice what you have to toward Almighty God.
I wake up in the morning, just pray my traditional divine office. No one's gonna, give me any hassle or grief for praying my office, pray my mental prayer, and I'm not considered rigid, all this kind of stuff. And that's another aspect of the crisis too, is that because I'm, learning more and more about the French school of spirituality, which in its historical context came about because there was the clergy needed to be reformed in France in the 17th century. And so that's when St. Francis de Sales and the oratory made a real impact in France at that period. And It was after the Spanish Counter-Reformation with St. Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross and other religious communities in Spain. The clergy and the religious needed reformation, and boom, reformation happened. It was allowed. It was permitted. Today in the church, if you want to start a traditional religious community, reformation is impossible. It's forbidden. It's suppressed. Reformation of the clergy, reformation of religious life, it's suppressed. It's suppressed. So that's another aspect of the crisis that is, in one sense, it requires religious community to go outside of ordinary jurisdiction, so to speak, so that we can actually live authentic religious life and reform religious life and reform the clergy.
So the reason, and you wrote about this in a Substack about a month ago, Father, Substack article, Restless Heart Media Substack. You talked about how precisely, for example, the oratory of St. Philip Neri grew so rapidly because bishops said, okay, the Protestant revolt is overtaking everything. We need good clergy to teach the Catholic faith and to offer the sacraments. How can I get that? Okay, look, there's this order. They have wonderful formation. I want them in my diocese. So back in the day, whenever there was a crisis, the bishops would look for authentic renewal. Nowadays, it's Jimmy Martin has full faculties, but Father Mike can't offer the Latin Mass if he wants to.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, all right, let's get started on the questions. But before we get started on the questions, I do want to remind everybody about the Procedamus Gala coming next weekend over at Clearwater Beach, Florida. Looking forward to seeing you all over at the Procedamus Gala 2026, procedamus.com. All right, so first question. Mark, thank you so much for the question. He says, here's a question for you. How should a trad Catholic man react to the great evil in our country? This Epstein evil has upset me greatly. What do you think, Father?
Vote harder, MAGA harder. I mean, one of the things that blows my mind isn't so much that the Epstein's file exists, is that no one's prosecuted. Like there's names now. There's names now, and nothing's happening. People believe that Christendom is just vote harder, vote for conservative politicians, even if they're not Catholics, because we're moving the football 1 yard forward. Christendom is a fruit of there being Catholics in the country. I always make this point that both Constantine the Great and King Clovis I, who was in France, they converted to Catholicism because they found it expedient to convert to Catholicism because the vast majority of their population that they were ruling were Catholics. They would have greater influence over their population if they shared the same faith as their population, as their people. Today, it's we expect the exact reverse. Our population is not Catholic, not practicing Catholic, but we just think if we just elect one good Catholic in a political position, then it'll fix everything. This is why I constantly call it like the Catholic Homeowners Association, where we don't really want the social kingdom of Christ the King. We just want a Catholic Homeowners Association where like LGBTQ or drag queen story hour in public libraries is forbidden. And that's kind of the extent of things. No, we actually need Catholics. We actually need to form Catholics. It's a long game. It's ground up. It's saving souls first, and then Christendom is the fruit of this. But also it's we have to get rid of this false expectation of what we think Christendom was. We think Christendom was just like everybody was Catholic and everything was perfect. But we're constantly seeing throughout the history of the need for reformation of both the clergy and of the people of God, the faithful. We see that in St. Francis of Assisi, who in the 1200s, our Lord said, "Go and rebuild my church, for as you can see, it lies in ruins." This was in the period of Christendom. And then, of course, you have the Protestant revolt happening in the 1500s. You have the Counter-Reformation in Spain, and then in France, all over the place. So the idea that Christendom was like this city of God on earth, it's false. What do you think, Alberto?
So regarding specifically Mark's question, I really have gotten to the point, Father and Mark, to where I am very, I think it is not to pat myself on the back or anything, but I think I've gotten to the point to have achieving a holy indifference, meaning, for example, I like to follow sports news about soccer or whatever, football, whatever, baseball, whatever sport you like. We all follow along. If you rightly understand leisure, you follow along, but you know that it's just a game and that it really has no repercussions in the real world, in the real life. So we're watching, oh, it's just a game, it's a leisure. So I've kind of have started seeing even politics, Father, the same way. Like, okay, I
Mhm.
can keep up with the news and then this or that, but having a detachment, knowing that at the end of the day, it's really just there to exist, to take away our peace and to take away our recollection. So what I would say is if we focus on imitation of St. John the Baptist, of St. Joseph, then we don't really even have to worry about the undoubtedly great evil in our countries in the West. We just understand that our duty is a different one. We don't have a duty to participate in systems because I'm not only talking about the United States, I'm talking about any country. I don't think that we have a duty to participate in a system which whole purpose is to damn our souls.
Mhm.
So I would say if we look to Saint Joseph, if we look to Saint John the Baptist, and try to imitate them as well as we can. Like if I can imagine Saint Joseph in Nazareth, or Saint Joseph fleeing to Egypt, knowing that Herod wanted to kill our blessed Lord, but I'm sure that that Saint Joseph was recollected, and that he was not very much troubled because he had a very very good understanding of divine providence and of doing your best, and then divine providence taking care of the rest. Really, very radically. So that's what I would say. If we just look to Saint Joseph, we look to Saint John the Baptist, and living as holy lives as possible with us, and focusing on being kind to those around us. I think that's how we deal with the evil. Meaning, we just deal with the evil by ignoring it, and focusing on our own evil that's within us. Now, this is not a pacifism, as they call it. This is not a pacifism. This is turning our weapons, our spiritual weapons, toward the true enemy. Not just being, not nothing matters. Of course, all of this matters, but the way that we can make a true change, we've talked about this, Father, in our series on the restoration of Christian culture, is by raising vocations.
Mhm.
Raising vocations, converting people close to us, having those spiritual conversations. So we're taking our weapons and utilizing them for the arena in which we are actually fighting, and not the one that they want to make us believe that we're fighting in. Sorry, this keeps going off.
Mhm.
All right, so let's see. Next question. Well, Saint Padre Pio also says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I bet this is what part of what Saint Joseph was praying as he's going to Egypt. So this is an interesting question. Diane, welcome back to the chat. She asks, a non-Catholic asked me, what did Christ answer to, am I my brother's keeper? Would Father have an answer for this? So am I my brother's keeper? This is related to Cain in
Yes.
the Genesis.
And the answer is, I mean, really, the second commandment: love thy neighbor. Our Lord gave the answer of the parable of the Good Samaritan. So, yeah, we have an obligation to love our neighbor because, I mean, when God dwells in our neighbor, and our neighbor is, a Christian that has the indelible mark of baptism on their soul, we love God through them. We love God through them. In our series on knowing the love of God by Father Gary Lagrange, especially when he talks about fraternal charity within the religious community. He explains very, very clearly how love of God and love of neighbor are very intrinsically united. Explaining the first letter of St. John, that you cannot say that you love God if you don't love your neighbor. That you can't say you love God who you don't see if you don't love your neighbor who you do see. So in terms of my brother's keeper, I mean, most especially, first and foremost, from scandal and from sin. This is really, really big when it comes to women dressing in modesty, because a lot of women are always like, oh well, he could just not look. He could just not look. Like, no, we have to be actually concerned for those who are weak. We have to be concerned for those that are weak. Actually, this is another thing that I got a lot of backlash from my article on the immorality of ballet. And a lot of people say, "Oh, if guys are really seeing, these ballerinas who are wearing these, tight tights with these mini skirts and tight clothes, all that kind of stuff, if they're doing that, then it's their problem. They're lustful. They have a perverted mind." It's like, we're supposed to be concerned for those that are weak. We're supposed to be concerned for those that are weak. So yeah, so
Yep. There we go. So the short answer is yes, we are a brother's keeper. Let's see. Gavin, thank you so much for the question. Gavin asks, how can a person best do their purgatory while on earth for all their past sins? So I'll answer this before passing it over to you, Father. So doing purgatory on earth for all their past sins. So I would think it depends. So are we concerned about, okay, so we've committed a lot of grave sins before conversions? I know that I have. And is the answer, how can we suffer? Because that's what our Lord calls us to. Or is this trying to say, okay, purgatory is horrible, so I'm going to try to live it here, so that way I don't have to go to a horrible purgatory. My sort of view on this, Father, is actually John Henry Newman's. He writes in one of his writings, he says, I will go to purgatory. And so we see the great saints, St. Augustine, St. Francis, St. Dominic, and we really see them as perfect. But the truth is that they were not perfect. They were nowhere near perfection compared to Almighty God. So it really depends. If we are trying to suffer here, then I would say, Father, correct me if I'm wrong, just waking up every day and saying, I am going to do the will of God, and whatever Almighty God brings, and then additional penances with the aid of a spiritual director. But in terms of, I think it's probably healthy if we just have a resignation that we are going, when we die, we'll be placed at the very, very bottom of purgatory if we're lucky. What do you think, Father?
Well, taking an example from St. Teresa of Avila, because the martyrs skip purgatory, they go straight to heaven. You can just go to like northern Nigeria, just go to mass there, and you'll probably end up being a martyr, unfortunately, or fortunately. Unfortunately in a materialist sense, but fortunately in a eternal sense, eschatological sense. So no, doing the will of God in the sense requires you to take everything that happens in your day and understand that it comes through divine providence. Nothing that happens to you would have allowed to happen to you if not foreseen first and foremost by God the Father. So everything is working towards your good and helping you detach yourself from what your passions are, in a sense, naturally leading you towards. So we all have our attachments. We all have our predominant faults, our inclinations to sin, certain attachments to sin, and this is what we need to be concerned with freeing ourselves from. So most especially, mental prayer is an incredible aid to this, but also doing little penances, as what Alberto was saying, a spiritual director, to help you have a penance that you don't want to do. Of course, I constantly tell a story of my college friend who told me like, "Oh, I only do the penances that I like." Well, that completes the whole purpose of doing mortification. Is you're not supposed to like it. It's supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to be challenging. Not to frame this in an Exodus 90 sort of way, but it's supposed to be something that you find difficult in the sense that you don't want to give it up. In sense, you try to convince yourself, I don't have to give this up, but nevertheless, it's good that you give it up so that you train yourself to not give yourself everything you want all the time, because we have our attachments. So that's really what purgatory is. That's what purgation is. The dark night of the senses and the dark night of the soul are, you can only do so much to purge yourself. And these two events in the spiritual life is when God has to go and purge you as well in this life. So you do what you can and let God do the rest.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, Gavin, so much for the question. Chris asks, question, are the bishops in Mexico more conservative than bishops in the United States? The answer is no. They are just as bad. If you go into like Mexican rat trad Twitter, you'll find very similar stuff, very, very, very similar stuff than what we find over in the United States. So it's a Novus Ordo institution-wide cancer, this insanity. And then, of course, there is the occasional, which we also have in the United States, which is very annoying, Father. The occasional bishop that retires, becomes a bishop, archbishop emeritus, retires, and then becomes all of a sudden based. And like, for example, the one that comes to mind over in the United States is Cardinal Dolan, who, as soon as his successor was announced, he's posting about how, oh, we no longer rename babies after they're Christian. What are you talking about? You're responsible for that. Oh, we're just lamenting it. Oh, it's so bad that Okay, what did you say that while you were the Cardinal Archbishop of New York? So
Exactly.
this is a very common phenomenon, Father, that bishops become based, and every time you see like a remnant article or whatever, oh, Archbishop Emeritus, it's like, who
I
cares?
know, right? Eleganti. But then he goes out against SSPX too. So it's like talking out of both sides of their mouth.
This very much reminds me, and it happens a lot in Hispanic families. I bet that it also happens over in white families. But you have a husband that is very successful, engineer, long career, and everything. Did very well with money. Had only 2 or 3 children, really at most, but was not religious. The wife was the one taking care of everything, and of course, naturally, the children fall away from the practice of the faith. And then, whenever they retire, they start going to daily mass and they become very devoted. And then they're just trying to browbeat their children who were not raised with a father that's Catholic or devout into now following the faith that they found. This sort of reminds me about that. Well, yes, but you weren't saying all these things while we were growing up, or you weren't behaving this or that way. But now you have an expectation that I do it when you never did it. So, but no, anyway, the bishops in Mexico are not more conservative than in the United States. I think they're worse, actually, a little more lispy in a lot of cases. Justin Widely says, thoughts on living well below your means. For example, debt-free, no mortgage and debts, more time for leisure, being a present father for the family, building a family economy, trade, agrarian, etc. Yes, I would just add there, having access to the daily sacraments. What do you think, Father?
Absolutely. I mean, nothing against any of this.
Yeah. Boomer Hernandez says, blessings, everyone. Blessings. Thank you so much for joining us in the chat. Diane says, holy indifference sounds good. Yes. So, you know, just to, again, not a pacifism, not a, oh, well, nothing matters anyway. No, yes, there is a big fight as far as the restoration of our society. But how we are going to achieve that is in our homes, is with the people around us, not in the voting booth. So just taking those weapons and then actually employing them against the true enemy in a way that actually has an impact. Boomer Hernandez says, I no longer care to vote. Both sides are evil. Mark Becker says, thank you. And then he says, I feel the same way about gambling. Let's see. Ronnie asks, hello, can a parishioner at a Novus Ordo parish go to mass at your church, Father?
I mean, if you present yourself for communion, I'm not a sedevacantist. There's a sedevacantist that, you know, if they don't know your name and all that kind of stuff, your background, and they don't give you communion, we're not like that. If the Catholic approach to this is that if someone presents themselves for Holy Communion, then you trust that they, you know, this is on them, not rather than the priest. Well, would your Novus Ordo bishop like it? Probably not. Would your Novus Ordo priest like it? Probably not. Will we have a problem with it? I mean, come experience tradition. Come experience a high mass. We're not going to have a high mass the Sunday after the Procedamus Gala here. So February 22nd, we're having a sung mass and missa cantata at Our Lady of Good Hope. Come experience it. See what it's about.
Gavin says, that makes sense. Thank you. And then Diane has a question. Would Father recommend the monastic diurnal for lay persons saying the divine office?
Absolutely. I find it a little bit more complicated than the Roman breviary, but they do sell the monastic diurnal in Latin and English, which is why it's convenient. So yeah, sure.
And then that's it. We ran out of questions. We need more questions.
I need more questions,
Or
guys.
maybe I just need to talk a little bit longer while we're answering the questions. Let's see which question can I maybe develop a little bit. So I would be interested to know, Diane, regarding this question. A non-Catholic asked me, what did Christ answer to, am I my brother's keeper? What was the context of this non-Catholic having this question? Meaning, were they Protestant, and was it like an attack on the Catholic faith? Was it maybe an atheist person? I would be interested actually in the context for which this question happened under. Let's see. Let's see. All right. New question. Ronnie asks again, is it required for men to wear a tie at your mass?
I mean, unfortunately, most of them don't. It's Florida, so a lot of them have this retiree Florida kind of disposition. I mean, they dress nice, you know, business casual, that sort of thing. But we're not going to turn anybody away if they don't have a tie. You know what I mean? I mean, the altar servers aren't wearing ties. I'm not wearing a tie, so.
So Diane's answer is, my husband asked and is thinking. Okay, great. Yeah, that's a good context. All right, Benjamin Ling 8269 just missed half the show to pick up one of my kids from practice. Did you solve rigid SSPX versus heal me with your mouth guy? What did I miss? Oh, you missed a lot. You missed 45 minutes of truth bombs. But we didn't really talk about this. So Father Pagliarani meets with Cardinal Tucho Fernandez, which poor Father Pagliarani, he's been trying to get a meeting with Dr. Prevost, but he is not Father James Martin, so he's not granted an audience with Leo XIII. Apparently, Taylor Marshall had an audience with Leo. I assume it was just he went to shake his hand or something like that. But apparently even Marshall got a quick meeting with Prevost, but not Father Pagliarani. That's really it. So he gets told, okay, we can engage in further discussions if you suspend the June 1st. Is it June or July? I forget. I think it's June,
July 1st.
right?
July.
If you suspend July, that's correct. If you suspend the July 1st consecrations, then maybe we can talk about it. Or you will be committing a schism, blah, blah. So nothing. No real update there.
Yeah. For me, the whole weird thing is, I mean, after 2012, I mean, this is the whole talks thing. Having talks with the Vatican was why Bishop Williamson separated from the SSPX. And so now, all of a sudden, Fillet is all about abandoning the possibility of talks with Rome. I mean, that's where they were in 2012, but instead, they decided to go through with it. So now it's just like, so what was 2012 all for? What was Fillet trying to gain back in 2012 that all of a sudden now is perfectly fine to throw out the door? That doesn't make sense to me. So I'm glad that we have such modernists in Rome right now, in the sense that I really do think they're going to put on interdict those that the faithful that go to SSPX chapels and fund them financially and all that kind of stuff. And people are going to have to see that you go to where you receive the true faith. And I love that the SSPX is now trying to say we're not founding a parallel church. Okay, if you're not founding a parallel church, that means you're not the only group to which people can go, because otherwise you would be a parallel church. You'd be exclusive, extra SSPX nulla salus. So if you're not establishing a parallel church, that means there's other groups to which you can go. They have to admit this fact. Which I think is great, because not everybody finds a home in the way they do their administration, in the sense that they have their own closets. So not all of us fit in with their. And also, they've turned away religious communities because they've had agreements with Rome that they would only kind of ordain those that have already been affiliated with them, and they won't welcome any more new communities. And so many of us, Oblates and Augustine, have had to find other homes to keep tradition alive. And so it would be nice if they kind of soften their position on extra SSPX nulla salus.
Thank you, Diane, so much for the super chat. As a reminder to everybody, Restless Heart Media is now monetized, so you can support the Oblates of St. Augustine also through the super chat now. Thank you so much, Diane. Appreciate that. Let's see. Where are we going? All right. Boomer Hernandez. It's hard for me to drive every Sunday in winter to the traditional Latin Mass and really hate attending the Novus Ordo. Is this a sin? So let's see. You have a hard time driving to a Latin Mass during winter. Perfectly understandable. It's very difficult to drive during winter in many places, and I really hate attending the Novus Ordo. So is it a sin, Father, to not attend the Novus Ordo?
The way I was asked this question actually more recently is does the Novus Ordo satisfy the Sunday obligation? So if you consider the history and the construction of the Novus Ordo, with 9 Protestant ministers advising the concilium on the liturgy, the intention of removing everything uniquely Catholic from the liturgy, and then putting in a Talmudic meal prayer as the offertory, one can conclude that this is not a Catholic rite. It is not a Catholic rite. But to fulfill your Sunday obligation, you must attend a Catholic rite. Therefore, the Novus Ordo does not meet the requirements of satisfying the Sunday obligation. The only thing Catholic about it, so to speak, is that the Pope promulgated it. But now Paul VI had to reissue the missal itself because in the very introduction of the missal, it had a heretical definition of the Mass because he didn't even look at it. And then, of course, there's it's kind of, I don't know if it's folklore or rumor or whatever else, but it's also rumored that on the Monday after Pentecost, he walks into the sacristy and he sees green vestments laid out in the sacristy, and he says, "Where are the red vestments? Is the octave of Pentecost?" And the sacristan said, "No, Holy Father, you suppressed the octave of Pentecost." And supposedly he wept. Supposedly he wept. So the Pope obviously didn't do due diligence to ensure that this new rite was even Catholic before he promulgated it. So all signs point to the fact that the Novus Ordo doesn't even satisfy the Sunday obligation. So, I mean, is the consecration valid? Yes. I mean, it says the words of institution. I mean, directly from St. Paul in Corinthians. So, is the consecration valid? Yes. But the obligation, so to speak, if you can't attend a traditional Latin Mass, to be honest, you're dispensed of the obligation.
There we go. That's the answer. And it's also not a sin, just directly going to the wording in the question, to hate attending the Novus Ordo.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating to me, Father, having grown up in the Novus Ordo. Whenever I've found myself sort of going, not for an obligation or anything, but, a very, very close family friend wedding or whatever, counting with one hand, whatever that is, I get the same feeling that I had when I was a child, that I hated going there, which is normal when you're a child not liking going. But it's like I get a throwback to my childhood, the same feeling, which I only really ever feel in the Novus Ordo. So that's pretty funny.
Archbishop Lefebvre, though, I should say real quick, Archbishop Lefebvre did say you should avoid the Novus Ordo unless it's for a funeral or a wedding. That's just his words. But anyway.
Ronnie asks, any materials you would recommend to follow along with a Latin Mass? I've never been ever, but been considering going. So I know, Father, that you recommend the St. Andrew Missal, correct?
Mm-hmm. So actually, for the first... Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the St. Andrew Missal, and then I was going to say that my recommendation, if you're going for your first time, would be to just not follow along with anything, would be to just go.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly what I was actually going to say is for the first 4 or 5 times, just go watch. Just watch everything that's going on the altar. Watch when people stand, sit, kneel, all that kind of stuff. Just watch. Listen to the music, listen to everything that's going on, and just soak in the experience. And then after maybe 4 or 5 times, take your hand missal, try to follow along, know the different parts between the ordinary, the things that happen every single Mass, and the propers, things that change based on the feast day on the Sunday. And yeah, you'll learn more about the Mass. You'll be able to follow along the readings, that sort of thing, and you'll find much more spiritual nourishment from it.
Yeah. So I can definitely identify with that feeling, Ronnie. So when I started going over to a Latin Mass, the way that I felt like it's a completely different religion. I thought, okay, finally things make sense. I think it was a low Mass. I forget specifically, but I think it was a low Mass. But I thought this is the first Catholic Mass that I've ever been to in my entire life, and I grew up Novus Ordo. So just be comfortable being confused, basically, because it'll seem like a completely different service. Maybe you're online, you're a little more aware probably than I was when I first attended my first Latin Mass, so you may know a little bit more than I did at the time. But just really, some things, Father, you can only do for anything. You can only have one first time, so just enjoy that first time, and you probably will remember it for the rest of your life. Mark Becker says it seems like an encouraging development. Talks. Dalos Creole says, is it true that anyone over 60 is exempted from penance during Lent? Asking for a friend.
So I don't know about the 1983 code because I'm outside of that world. But in the 1917 code, I can tell you this. There's a difference between abstinence and penance, or abstinence and fasting. And so in the 1917 code, from Ash Wednesday all the way up to noon on Holy Saturday, excluding Sundays. So from Ash Wednesday to Holy Saturday at noon, you were required to fast. 40 days of fasting. 40 days of fasting. Abstinence from flesh meat is on Ash Wednesday, good, and every Friday during Lent. And then there's one set of Ember days in Lent. So abstinence on every Friday plus Ash Wednesday. Now for the abstinence of flesh meat, the obligation commences, it begins at 14 years of age and does not have an end. So everybody up to 99, 100 years old, so to speak. I mean, this is really excluding the dispensations for health reasons. Is required to abstain on the days of abstinence. But fasting, according to the 1917 code, is from ages 21 to 60. 21 to 60, fasting. So if you're over 60, you don't have to worry about the fasting portion of it. If you're under 21, and this is really like in the Code of Canon Law, in the 1917 Code of Canon Law, 21 was the age of adulthood. So is it true over 60 is exempted from penance? I don't know what the 83 codes, because again, the 83 code did away with fasting, and they did away with like they did away with fasting for the 40 days. You only have to fast on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday or something like that. So they might have tried to put in penance, and of course, in the 83, I think it's specifically abstinence from flesh meat on Fridays during Lent, even though the rest of the year you can substitute that penance or whatever. But yeah, I mean, at least traditionally in the old code, the fasting was from 14 to 60, or 21 to 60. 21 to 60.
Now, Father, a follow-up question that a lot of people have every single year. Traditional fasting. So I want to keep the 355 Lent this year. How old am I? I'm a 31-year-old male. What does healthy male, what does fasting look like for me?
Dom Prosper Guerin J in the liturgical years describes it as thus: it's one full meal with a collation, and a collation came from the Benedictines. So the Benedictines back in the day, they worked out in the fields. They had manual labor to do, and a lot of them were suffering a lot because they only had one meal and then had to do all this hard labor. So they were permitted then in the evenings. Usually they listened to some sort of conference in the evening. They went together in a room and listened to a conference. Someone was giving a speech or something, a lecture. And they were permitted a small little snack and some wine to regain their strength. And that's where the collation was born. Now, what's kind of funny is that, again, back in the day, you weren't allowed to have your full meal until after Vespers. Now, Vespers was traditionally like at around 6 o'clock. So it means like really, really late in the day. That was the first time you're eating. So what people began to do was move Vespers instead of 6 o'clock to noon. So during Lent, Vespers is to be set at noon. So that way you can eat after Vespers, which is kind of funny. It's kind of a way to cheat around things. But the law itself says is one full meal with two collations, that together the two collations don't equal a second meal. What does it look like for a 31-year-old healthy male? To be honest, even with some of the most rigorous religious communities that are all about penance, like Franciscans, traditional Franciscans, they acknowledge that the more manual labor you do, they actually lighten the load a little bit for those that have to do the manual labor and allow them to eat more food, more so than those who don't have the manual labor. And it's even so much so that during Lent, they're not even allowed to make their beds in the morning, to reduce the amount of work that they have to do so that they can fast even harder. So it depends on what your job is as a healthy 31-year-old male. If you're a construction worker, it's a lot different if you're just an accountant sitting behind a desk all day. So it all depends on what your workload is, and you try to stick to the law as close as possible. But if you have to if you're not in a bind and have to move somebody out within a matter of 24 hours because they're getting expelled from their apartment or something else, and you have to lift all the heavy furniture, I mean, you can eat a little bit more. So,
all right, great. One more final question, and then we'll just go through the comments that we're getting. It's getting late over at the OBSA house. Let's see. Chris Lopez asks, question: if you're engaged and you pick up your fiancé to have dinner, being alone in the car while driving to the destination, would that be a mortal sin, occasion of sin? Question. I would think it's not a mortal sin just in and of itself. I would think it's an occasion of sin. But if you're doing it knowing that it's an occasion of sin, then it can be graver. What do you think, Father?
I mean, yeah, you should always make sure your girlfriend takes an Uber. Just kidding. If you're engaged and you pick up your phone, say to have dinner, being alone in the car while driving to the destination, to be honest, I don't think that's a near occasion of sin. The near occasion of sin is being, I mean, because there's even laws against no loitering, and the first place the police officers, they pull up behind you, will flash the windows in the back seat, all these sorts of things. There's a lot of deterrence in this regard. I think the occasion, um, I mean, the sin itself that we're talking about, that is occasion of, is impure touches, those sorts of things, and usually you want a little bit more solitude than being in a car for those sorts of things. Now, if you have the habit of doing those sorts of things in the car, it could be that you specifically need to avoid that near occasion of sin because it's for you specifically. But in general, I don't think picking somebody up and going to a restaurant is an occasion of sin. No.
Boomer Hernandez says, thank you. You're welcome. Diane says, my husband said that even though the question is in the OT, it's edifying to hear that Christ in the church says the same thing. Absolutely. Mark Becker says, I have had times being a stay-at-homer. Sometimes you have to, unfortunately, in this day and age, which is why the Procedamus 2026 Gala is important, to help assist in safeguarding traditional Catholicism, so that none of us have to be stay-at-homers eventually. Mark says, I need the fasting part of it. The Los Creole says, just do the thing, 1 meal a day. There we go. That's the spirit. And Ronnie says, thanks for your answers, father and friend. You're welcome. And thank you, of course, for the super chat. Appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
And then Mark says, just let her drive. You'll be too scared to do anything. Well, then, let's see. Now, here's a question. Is letting her drive then endangering your life without a need? And then
it's basically, it's equivalent to bungee jumping.
Chris Lopez says, this is the best Catholic channel. I completely agree. Father, anything else before we end the stream for tonight, other than being back on Tuesday for the Story of a Soul?
We'll be back on Tuesday for Story of the Soul. Get your Procedamus tickets. This is the last week. Obviously, we have it's game day next Saturday. So looking forward to seeing all of you. If you're coming down for the gala, talking with you, having drinks with you, eating a meal with you, talking to you guys. Looking forward to it.
All right. See you all on Tuesday. See you, Father, on Tuesday.
See you later. God bless.